Okay, excellent. Welcome everyone to the webinar on responsible quantum technologies in Switzerland. My name is Mira Wolf-Bauwens. I lead the responsible quantum computing research at IBM Research here in Zurich. It's my pleasure to have you all here for this webinar that is hosted actually out of the Quantum Industry Days in Switzerland. So you can see here it's co-hosted by ID Quantique, CSEM, IBM Quantum, Zurich Instruments, the Quantum Center at ETH Zurich, NCCR Spin, and Euresearch. And we will be discussing the role that quantum technologies can be playing for society, and also how we can and should research and deploy it responsibly, and what the different challenges but also opportunities are that are occurring alongside. And I'm very happy that I'm joined by a set of very fantastic panelists with all sorts of very different backgrounds, but each of them experts in their respective fields. And so before we start the discussion, I would like to invite each of you to briefly introduce yourself, say a little bit about what your background is, which institutions you're joining us from today. So first of all, I'd like to invite Bruno Hattner to just say a little bit about who you are.
Okay, thank you, Mira, thank you. So I'm Bruno Hattner. I'm the Director of Strategic Quantum Initiative at ID Quantique. I am a physicist by trade, so I studied quantum physics many years ago, and I'm still studying it. But nobody understands it anyway, so I think that's a good start, and we need a lot of time to understand it. ID Quantique is a leader of quantum technologies for communication, especially, and I'm sure that we will discuss that at length during the panel. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you, Bruno. Next up, we have Philipp Kammerlander.
Thanks, Mira. Yeah, my name is Philipp Kammerlander. I'm the Executive Director of the Quantum Center at ETH Zurich. The Quantum Center unites 34 research groups at ETH Zurich that work on quantum technology in a broad sense. So not just physics, but also computer science, electrical engineering, and so on. I'm a physicist by education. I did a PhD in quantum information theory, but I'm also interested in applications and also in hardware. And I'm also a lecturer at the Department of Physics at ETH Zurich. And I'm very happy to be part of this panel about the responsible quantum technologies in Switzerland. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Philipp. And then I would like to invite Philippe Caroff to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Mira. Yes, so my background is as a corporate and academic researchers in semiconductor nanotechnologies and quantum materials. And currently I'm serving our community of students, scientists, researchers, and innovators at EPFL at the Center for Quantum Science and Engineering.
Thanks a lot, Philippe. And then we have our second Bruno Küng, if you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, everybody. Hi to the audience. I'm application scientist for quantum technologies at Zurich Instruments. Our company makes control electronics for quantum computers, superconducting spin-based quantum computers, and I'm in the company since 2015 in different roles, but mostly in product management and recently as marketing lead for the Qt product pillar. And I have a research background. I did a physics PhD on semiconductor nanostructures at ETH Zurich and a postdoc on superconducting qubits at Institut Niel in Grenoble.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Bruno. And finally, we have Jacques.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Jacques Esler from CSEM in Neuchâtel. I'm senior project manager working in quantum technologies, especially in quantum sensors development, background as a chemist and development of miniature atomic clock, and now leading projects regarding quantum sensors in general at CSEM.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, all of you, for joining today. Before we get started, one rule of housekeeping to all of our participants. As you can see, you have the possibility to put questions in the chat or using the Q&A function. So I would invite you, although we have questions, I've prepared a couple of questions to our panelists, but I would really invite you all to put your questions in the chat or using the Q&A function, as we would like to keep this as interactive as possible for such a large audience. So please don't be shy and use that function if you have any questions. So before we get started, just to kind of put us a little bit in the mindset on why we thought, we as the organizers of the Quantum Industry Days, where we thought it's important to discuss responsible quantum, I just brought you this one view, and I should put the caveat that it's a view for quantum computing, so a mix of quantum computing and quantum technologies. That shows, as you can easily see, it's the map of the globe. And you can see here the different investments in quantum technologies. And why I'm bringing this is because it shows one of the motivating factors as to why we're discussing responsible quantum technologies. So if you look at the map closely, what you'll notice, although the figures are distributed all across the map, but if you look where they're actually pointing to, you will note that actually they're pointing mostly to countries that are in what we call the quote unquote global north, or in the more developed regions of the world. And so what this indicates is that if we're not careful, and if we're not addressing this, that we're running the risk of actually having a global digital divide on quantum technologies. So in a way, we might, and I'm putting this very carefully because we're so early on with quantum technologies, but we might see what we're already seeing with a classical digital divide. We might be seeing that for quantum technologies. And so I guess this map raises the question, and although it changes, so there's more countries adding investments, but nonetheless, it raises the question, do we really want to reiterate the mistakes we've been doing with classical computing? Can't we do better? And isn't there other ways of approaching this? So one kind of question that is motivating the seminar, and also the research on responsible quantum technologies is it inevitable that we're exacerbating global inequalities again, also with quantum technologies? And another reason why we're discussing this is, of course, that also we all know that we're very early on with quantum technologies. So it's actually, we have the possibility of being proactive. We haven't done any mistakes yet with quantum computing. So instead, in contrast to classic computing or AI, we can actually act before it's too late, and we can think about what might be the implications of quantum technologies, and mitigate for those implications that are undesired before they materialize. Secondly, and I really want to bring that, is that in my experience in working in the community, I think everyone who works on quantum technologies actually is in this endeavor, and it is a huge research endeavor because everyone is fascinated by the possible uses of quantum computing and the possible good it can bring to society. I haven't met any researcher who isn't spending more hours than they should in the lab, who's not saying that they're working on this because they see the prospect that it can be bringing, and we'll be talking about the opportunities the quantum technologies can be bringing in a second. And so this is really what the community currently is motivated by. And so I think as a community, we also have a responsibility to make sure that this is what we are actually using quantum technologies for. And finally, we also have a moral responsibility to do so. So we have a moral responsibility to be vigilant, to foresee what the implications are, and also to make sure that where we are having opportunities to address those opportunities and make sure that the opportunities materialize. So that just kind of a few thoughts on why we're discussing responsible quantum computing, and why it's important to discuss that now. And I think if we can now bring the view to our speakers and not distract us any longer by numbers that are being invested in quantum computing. Great, thank you. I will start with my first question. And that is kind of a little bit, I was hinting to it a little bit, but as a recap. So if we take a societal point of view, what do you think are the most exciting opportunities that quantum technologies can afford? And I will start with Bruno Hartner.
Yes, thank you. So my answer may be a little bit biased because we are working in ID Quantique in quantum communication. And that's what I think is really the most exciting opportunity for us. I'm sure that all my colleagues will expand on other aspects which are no less exciting, just probably less known to me. So basically, quantum communication is a way to make sure that you have secure communication between different people, I mean, many people in the world, today we are exchanging more and more data, but we take more and more risk because our networks are not really well protected. Even today, we have many issues with our protection, hacking and so on. And once we have a quantum computer, things will only get much worse because a quantum computer will break what we are using today for securing our communication. Quantum communication is a way to improve that and to go back to having a really secure communication between any part of the world to another. This is the long-term goal, and that's why it's really exciting. What is also exciting is that even today, we have a first step towards total quantum, global quantum communication, which is quantum random number generators, which can be used in any kind of communication today to improve the security, and quantum key distribution, which is a first step towards secure quantum communication, which we'll probably discuss a bit later. So I think it's very interesting, both in the short term with a few things which are already here, and in the long term with a view of securing communication globally for all users.
Excellent. I think that is a great sort of set of opportunities from the communication perspective. If we move to the computing perspective, and maybe I can move to Bruno or Philip there, where do you see the greatest opportunities?
Maybe I can go first. Maybe not so much on a technical opportunity, but one aspect that I really see important, very immediate actually, is the relevance for the workforce that this technology has in engineering and in physics, and maybe particularly in physics, where I come from, where I see that quantum tech, quantum computing can be really a great visionary technology that speaks to people that launch themselves into that field. Comparable to what I imagine with my age must have been maybe a moonshot in the past, or still is semiconductor technology. So really something to aspire to as a high-level perspective of the field. And I think it's important for companies like us, but for the QT field in general, to have people in the workforce that have an understanding of the inner workings of such technology from the side of the fundamental sciences, and bring this together with the engineering side. And in that sense, I really can see that the quantum tech can be a kind of the moonshot technology today.
So is it right if I was to rephrase it that quantum technology is also a way of bringing kind of seeing physics at work and sort of bringing fundamental physics to society as well?
Absolutely. Beyond the high school physics exercises to something exciting that brings people into that field. Yeah.
Excellent. And maybe Philip, since you're also teaching quantum theory, I think, if I'm not mistaken, where do you see, why did you get yourself engaged in that, and where do you see the applications of quantum computing? I mean, you must have a reason to be fascinated by it, to say the least.
Okay, yeah, that's true. So first, I'd like to agree with Bruno that it's a great visionary technology, and I think that's one of the reasons why I got into it in the first place. I'm studying quantum information theory in particular. To be honest, the main reason for me was a bit less profound, also because it was just a very, very beautiful theory. Quantum theory is just so nice. It made me always happy when I worked with it. That's maybe not a very good argument for someone who is interested in applications. So speaking of applications, I don't want to sound too negative, but I'm also trying to not hype this too much, because when I hear things like quantum computing will solve the climate crisis, or at least help solving the climate crisis, or help curing diseases, yes, these are, if you want, opportunities, potential opportunities. But at this point, we are extremely far away from any applications of this type. It might be that the quantum computers at some point bring us a step forward in one or two of these areas, which would be great. But it's today not just the hardware that is missing, but it's also the software that is missing. So we have a few applications that we know once we have a full-scale fault-tolerant quantum computer, we can do these tasks, like factorization, which is the thread that Bruno Huttner was referring to before. But when it comes to the applications I mentioned before, like simulation of molecules, dynamics, in particular, proteins and so on, well, we have ideas of how this could be done. But if I talk to people from big companies in pharma, for instance, like Roche or Boehringer Ingelheim, they tell me that what is known up to today, they wouldn't even make use of these algorithms at this point, because even though we have sort of estimates of how this could be done with a full-scale quantum computer, we're just not yet there also on the software side. So not just only the hardware, which is anyway clear that we are far from being a full-scale fault-tolerant quantum computer. So I think it's a bit too early when it comes to quantum computing to speak about specific opportunities, but nevertheless, it's definitely worth keeping in particular the societal point of view in mind when developing these technologies. I fully agree with that.
Okay, and I'm glad you're bringing up the timeline there, because this is really something I think all of us would agree on, that that also why I mentioned we're really proactive in having this discussion now, because it is very early on and we are in the very early stages of the research and the development of maybe quantum computing, more early stages than some of the other technologies. And so moving sort of to some of the other technologies such as quantum sensing, Philippe and Jacques, where do you see the opportunities from a societal perspective there?
Yeah,
Philippe,
I can start, but definitely under the control of Jacques, who is much more expert on this topic. I want, of course, to talk a bit about quantum sensing, because when we think about what are the more mature technologies, we get all the attention to quantum computing, but quantum communication, as well as quantum sensing, are actually products you can buy, which has market. And even though it's emerging, you can already see some quantum sensor at work, like the LIGO big gravitational wave detector is definitely a quantum sensor, but also the atomic clocks that Jack is expert in. So I think that there are very interesting opportunities right now. Some of them are about this seismic monitoring. There are experiments already with a quantum gravimeter that have basically a higher, like orders of magnitude better sensitivity, or sometimes they can be decoupled from the mechanical noise, so they are just better to be transported in the field. So these are applications that are right now, and I think they don't get as much attention as they should.
Yeah, I think you're right, Philippe. Products are already on the market, and physics is hidden behind. So quantum physics is hidden behind that, and nobody knows about what is exactly behind that. And you think about atomic clocks, which are here since decades, but they help you to geolocalize and to have better localization for everyone on your car, in your train, on your plane, and so on. And this is all thanks to atomic clocks. You have also big opportunity in medical applications. So there are sensors that are sensing the brain activity, for example, to see if there are potential diseases in your brain and things like that. And all that is thanks to quantum technology. And these are big opportunities for quantum sensor in particular.
Thanks, and thanks also, yeah, for highlighting that there's other applications, of course, of quantum technologies or other quantum technologies that are already in use. I think back to also Philippe Kammerlander's point about not making the hype, I think it's equally important, Philippe and Jacques, like you highlighting that there are applications, or that there's areas in which we're using quantum technologies without maybe being aware of it, and that they're not getting the attention that they're deserving. And I think that relates also to sort of the often misconceptions that quantum computing and the theory of it is something new. It's something that only started in the last 10 years, and that is absolutely not true. It's much older than that, and it's only in the last 10 years maybe that we're seeing ways to actually realizing some of the theory and some of the ideas of Feynman and others that are much older, from the 70s. But Philippe, I see you wanted to react to this as well.
Yes, I wanted to add to what Philippe and Jacques were saying, namely that there is physics behind these applications that people are not aware of typically. And it's okay that many people are not aware of the physics behind applications. For instance, I'm not aware of all the physics that is behind my smartphone. That's all right. No one needs to be. But it's still good to keep this in mind, because I think there is one field which tends to get left out quite a lot, which is the basic research, which is also benefiting a lot from the developments in quantum technologies in general. And this is also the source from which these technologies arise. And then Philippe Garoff, for instance, mentioned LIGO, which in my opinion, is sort of the first true quantum advantage that we have seen, which is relevant, right? And we should also not forget to go in this direction more, because I think there are many exciting opportunities of quantum technologies related to basic research as well.
Maybe quickly before we move on, if you could, one of you two, Philippe or Philip, if you could just say what LIGO is for those who might not know.
Philippe Garoff, since you started it, do you want?
The acronym would be, it's so it's a large interferometer, so it's basically two very large arms with mirrors that are able to sense the gravity waves. So, for example, when you have two black holes that collide, they basically make the space-time oscillate around them, and that's a new way of looking at objects that actually do not emit light, or not directly to us, at least. So it's a new way of learning something about our universe that has been completely enabled by objects that are extremely sensitive and therefore quantum.
Yeah, exactly. And just to add before I take you, Bruno Hattner, also on quantum computing, I think the point you're making, Philip, is very important. I think often we might hear some people talking about the quantum winter just because they're seeing that some investments are slowly going down, and maybe that's good also in terms of de-hyping. But there's an understatement then also, just because the investments in startups are going down, that doesn't mean that the fundamental research we're doing and the importance that quantum computing is having for the fundamental research and from what we're learning actually about the universe and what we're learning from this research, that this is something that if you kind of just come from a pure industry perspective, you seldomly hear. And I think this is a line, or this is kind of an argument and something that we need to hear more, that there's not only, all the startups, and I don't want to discredit all of our wonderful startups, but that is not all that there is to quantum technologies. Bruno.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a quick word going back to Earth, unfortunately, from the black holes and so on, from Philip's comment that you don't really see quantum, but it can be useful. Today, you got a few million people using a smartphone in Korea, which includes a quantum random number generator, which increases the security of the phone. So I would say you already have a few applications which are mainstream and are used today by many, many people. Okay, it's a very restricted one, generating good keys, but it's there already. And we're working hard to make it happen all around the world. That's a fight, but I hope we will manage to do that.
Oh, okay, excellent. So I think we have a good idea of the different uses from a society point of view. Also, already some of the maybe unintended social implications. But if we go a little bit further, so we were saying, I mean, of course, we're very early on, so it's very hard to even speak about the opportunities. And in a similar manner, it is hard to speak about what the actual unintended implications might be, but it's nonetheless good to think about them. So I'm sure all of you have put some thought into, while we're doing this and also while we're deploying some of these technologies, what might be some of the unintended social implications of some of these technologies. And I'll start with maybe Philippe Garoff.
Yeah, so there are quite, I mean, if I keep to one subtopic, because we know there is a risk of quantum computers essentially breaking some of the actual basically algorithm that protects the encryption that we have. So I'm not a specialist who will talk about it, but I'm sure it will be addressed. One thing is the military, like the US Department, has identified quantum sensing as being one of the most like immediate threats to the military, because basically with some of the sensors you can find nuclear like weapon carrying submarines potentially, and if you manage to bring these sensors in the air or in space, which is definitely possible, you have these unintended consequences that you might find new geological wonders that are buried by just mapping the gravity anomalies. But you can also find the places that should be kept secret for good reasons, for national security. So that's that's a direct path to giving an advantage to a potentially adversary. And if you don't keep these technologies and development open, we would not even know they are being developed. So there's also a point about how open the science and the advances should be to the.
Yeah, I think that's very good if we can so to also think about, while thinking about the implications, the unwanted one, like you were mentioning in your last point, what might be the ways to mitigating for the unintended consequences. So one is, or at least being aware of them, one is open research so that we're aware of them. Jacques, you wanted to add?
Yeah, these are threads on quantum sensors, but they are already there. So it's quite nature, so quantum sensing, and they are all dual use sensor. You take an atomic clock, you take a gyroscope, you take a magnetometer. It can always be used in a good way for the society, but also for military applications. And there are international treaty that treat that, what you can use and what you cannot use, but you will not avoid having these sensors being used in a way you would not like to have them used. And we have to be aware of that, and also to keep the technologies where you want to have them used. Perhaps there are also international treaties that should also mention which country are allowed or not to use them.
Yeah, I think that brings up an interesting element on the role international treaties can play, and also the role, for instance, maybe regulation can and should play. So Bruno Küng, when you're thinking about the maybe unintended consequences, maybe, well, the ones you can be foreseeing, but maybe you can also add, what do you think is your point of view in terms of the role that companies like Zurich Instruments are playing in making sure that we're not having these unintended consequences, or also what the role of international bodies or international treaties like Jacques was mentioning might be?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, in the quantum computing field, of course, we're in still a different stage than in the sensing, and surely the applications like in sensing can be dual use, but we're just farther away from it. Companies like us, of course, we have to act responsibly in the sense of, with what countries do we work together with to make quantum computing ahead. But from today's to bring quantum computing ahead, but even from today's perspective, I mean, to make it dangerous, you first have to make it happen. And being more on the optimistic side, I see this closing up of the research, which maybe is motivated by the application of quantum computing in cryptography. The closing up on the corporate level or on the national level may just slow this research down. And I think nowadays quantum computing would still be in the stage where it would benefit much more from an open exchange. The overall progress would be much faster. Of course, beyond a certain threshold, it's valuable to have individual organizations really pushing for it, going for it on their own. But I think this threshold is not there yet. So I see this development with some skepticism or also worry.
Yeah. Bruno Hattner, what does it look like from the sort of your perspective? Maybe also if you can add on how you see the importance of open collaboration also in that regard.
So I wanted first to come back to what Philippe Kammerlander has said, which is very interesting, is that today we are not sure exactly of how to use a quantum computer. We may be a bit far away from a real application of quantum computing. Unfortunately, we are very close to bad applications of quantum computing, which is basically breaking cryptography. So we're in a very strange situation where we know the bad things that a quantum computer will do, and we have to deal with them already today, because the danger, even though there is no quantum computer, is already with us. People could store all the data and decrypt it a bit later. So if we have data which we want to keep secure, we have to behave as if there was a quantum computer today. So I think that's very interesting to realize that we don't know all the uses, as Philippe has said, but we know already that there is a big danger of the quantum computer. For me, that's the biggest unintended consequence, is that we have to redo all our cryptography in order to make sure that we keep some kind of secrecy, confidentiality, and so on with our cybersecurity systems. Now, in terms of international collaboration, as soon as you deal with cybersecurity on this kind of issues, it's very hard to continue strong international collaboration. We see that there is a lot of discussion about sovereignty. And unfortunately, today, many countries would like to keep things to them. And I think I can only agree with the second Bruno here, is that we would need much more collaboration, at least at the beginning. And then at some stage, maybe we could change that. But if we don't get this collaboration today, we will only suffer from that. Even so, there are some dangers in collaborating too much, but I think the rewards are much stronger than that.
Okay. Philip, do you want to respond, since Bruno had now addressed you directly with your earlier concern, and then I will also add something regarding the threat of quantum computers.
Sure. So yeah. So Bruno Hadner is of course right that sort of the only true application that is known once we have a functioning fault-tolerant quantum computer, in my opinion, today that will certainly work and lead to an exponential speed up is the breaking of the current crypto systems, which is somehow the bad news. But also it shows the opportunity that there might be other relevant problems that also exhibit a similar speed up. And I would also like to comment on what Bruno Küng said, namely that research is closing up, in particular with respect to cryptography, which I can follow why this happens, but to me it's still a paradox, because the main idea of cryptographic security is the following. Typically, you have a method to encrypt your data, and you assume that this method is known to everyone. Every little detail of your method is known to everyone, and then sort of the security typically lies in the secret key that you share with your partner. And then when people start to close up, in particular research in cryptography, then I start to think they got something completely wrong there. Yes, and also this. So last comment about this closing up of research, and also approaching maybe the question from a slightly different viewpoint on unintended societal implications. I think whenever it comes to main breakthroughs in new technology, not necessarily only quantum technology, then there is also the main societal threat that only a small part of the people, and typically this is the wealthier and better educated people, will profit a lot from the new technology, and many others will essentially not profit or even get lost with the new technology, and maybe at some point even suffer from it. To some extent, I think we're seeing this with AI. So who can use a ChatGPT and all these machines? It's typically a more developed world. And when I say people are suffering, you could even like in the other half or in the other part, you could even think of those people need to train these machines, and that's actually like a labor that is essentially not paid to our standards, and these people are, in my opinion, to some extent suffering from this new technology. So I think when it comes to quantum technology, we should be aware of what has happened in the past, AI and also other examples, and still try to do all that we can do to keep the results open and accessible to everyone. I think that's the main thing we have to do, and also the most important thing we should do.
Yeah. I think that leads perfectly into one aspect I wanted to make about an unintended consequence being regarding awareness or access to the knowledge about quantum technologies. But before, I just wanted to react also to Bruno Hattner, what you were saying, and also Bruno Küng regarding sort of running Shor's algorithm and the possibility of breaking encryption. What I think is interesting there is also that the way that we're going about this, because so being part of one of the companies that builds a quantum computer, the moment we put a working quantum computer on the cloud, or a small one, we also put a solution for quantum safe cryptography out there. So like the technology that can kind of also mitigate for the risk was developed at the same lab, in the same environment. So it's also interesting that it's kind of, you're seeing that early on, you're being transparent about it, and you're kind of putting out the mitigating technology right at the same time. And that might be, to go back to Philip's point, one of the learnings from the past, that we're kind of addressing them and mitigating early, and maybe earlier than what we're doing with so for instance artificial intelligence. And I wanted to go back to one point that wasn't mentioned here, but I think that is very important, is also what I sometimes see as an unintended consequence even right now is the not only what I showed at the beginning, the difference in investments in quantum technologies, but also the difference in awareness and knowledge about quantum technologies. And I see that as I don't think it's intended by anyone, but as a potential risk as well globally. That so in the again at universities where we've always been doing research into physics, but also where there's been investments, people and also society at large are growing more and more aware of what quantum computing and other quantum technologies are, and so they can also prepare themselves. And I think this is part of the work that you're also doing with ID Quantique, prepare themselves and know what the implications are, but also prepare themselves for the uses of quantum computing. However, others who are less aware and also have different priorities, but might not even have access and might not even understand quantum technologies to the level that we are, although some of us who are listening here, it might be superficial level, but good enough to at least engage with the opportunities and challenges. And so there's even the discrepancy or the inequality in knowing about quantum. It's something seemingly trivial, but I think that can create real risks as well. Who's in the know, and as we know, sort of, to use the old statement, knowledge is power, who's in the know about quantum technologies, using, on the one hand, using them, but also kind of mitigating for some of the implications. And with that, I want to bring in one question from the audience, which is kind of pressing us a little more on, again, the role of international agreements, whether they could be useful, and whether governmental offices work on international regulative frameworks, or whether it's just the international quantum community that will kind of self-regulate themselves. And I know, Philippe Karoff, you're very involved in kind of science diplomacy, but also sort of speaking a lot with government folks. So what's your take on the role of, let's try to do a dichotomy of kind of the role of sort of maybe self-regulation versus regulation by national frameworks or by governments?
Thank you, Mira. It's a challenging question, but I mean, we can build on what we were mentioning before. If we are to learn from previous technologies, even now the leaders of AIs are calling for memorandum and to basically oppose in order for the policymakers and to catch up and regulate. And they are kind of asking themselves for the regulation. It's kind of too late, because especially multilateralism takes forever. It is really not the same pace as AI or quantum development. We can maybe it will take us 15 years, 20 years to make a very useful quantum computer, but it will also take that time for international treaties to be made. And so there's indeed this approach now of science diplomacy, trying to really at least bring some of the science that is cooking in the labs to the attention of policymakers, trying also to understand their language so that they they understand what is important, and they can make educated and data-driven rules and regulations. So I'm definitely for the regulation, because we cannot just let industries and researchers self-regulate. I mean, that has not worked in the past, except in very few exceptions, where it was recognized that indeed certain scientists recognize the impact, the direct impact of their research, but it was usually done after the fact. So if we have the chance to regulate before and engage with policymakers, which is something that is possible, we should. And there is International Geneva that is nearby. And so we have an opportunity as mostly scientists here to make a step in their direction as well.
Yeah, and since we're sort of discussing this in the context of the Quantum Industry Days in Switzerland, I think it's very good that you're bringing up International Geneva. So I think also to all the audience who are from Switzerland, I think this is an opportunity also that we're engaging, as you're saying, engaging with International Geneva and using that role that Switzerland can potentially play. Jacques, and then Bruno Hattner, I saw you wanted to respond to this as well.
Yeah, I want to react a little bit on what said Philippe on International Geneva, on regulating and trying to play its role on international treaty. Might be difficult, but that would be good that Switzerland could play a role. We see already now how quantum technology is important and strategic even in Europe. And you know the situation of Switzerland with the funding and the role Switzerland plays in the European field, which is not the best one now, but kind of put aside. To try to play a role and to regulate there, that would be nice, but I don't know if Switzerland would be the one which would be selected for doing so. And the second thing which I find difficult for regulating these things, but we should do, is the one who pays get the technologies. And we know that from quantum technologies, a lot of investment were made by the military governments, mainly in the US. And you can go against that. You cannot try to keep your technologies if those who are paying will want to use it. So this might be a challenge to merge this international treaty and the applications and the who pays.
Yeah, I wanted to be a bit more optimistic, maybe from Philip. We have seen a few opportunities where indeed international collaboration by the industry was successful, and this is really in communication. And the big example is actually even again in Geneva, which is a good thing, is the ITU, International Telecommunication Union. And everybody has to agree, because if you want to communicate, and again, that also have been said by Philip Kammerlander a bit earlier, if you want to communicate, and if you want to do crypto, both sides have to agree, otherwise there is nothing. So in these cases, actually, maybe it's a bit easier to have the industry work together with or without the government, because without this collaboration, you go nowhere. I mean, if I take my phone and the standard for talking is not the same as somebody in the other side of the world, I cannot talk, I cannot do anything. So all these standards have to be worldwide and so on. So everything linked to communication is a bit, let's say, more hopeful for collaboration than maybe other endeavors.
I think that's an important point. Philip Kammerlander, it looked like you wanted to react as well. And maybe I can make the question even more challenging and to add one from the chat. That is whether if you are in favor of, or if you think that international regulation could be a possibility, which organization could have the authority to actually enforce those rules?
The strongest? No, I don't know actually. So I cannot answer this additional question from the audience. And it shows that it's a very tricky question, I think. But I would like to add like one more point to something that has been touched many times, namely the sort of the parallels to AI research, and also with respect to this regulation or inexistent regulation in that case. And I think one thing we see very well with AI is that what happened there is there has been a lot of research, and there's still research happening at universities, but at some point the private industry took over and is now developing the most powerful language models. Okay, and this is what we see now. Even though they're still not, I would say, not very mature, but now they start to impress us, definitely. And this is also the point when everyone reacts like, oh, what's happening? And now we need to have regulations and so on. But one of the reasons why this did not happen earlier is because before it was, all this research was closed up in private companies. And with quantum tech, at least now, I think it's not yet the case. So most of the research is still done in say, as open as possible research institutions, universities in particular. And I think if we want to keep it that way, if you want to become a good example of open and accessible research and results, then we should make sure that certainly not all the relevant research and development is going towards the private companies. Not now, it's not happening, but also in 10 to 15 years when maybe applications just pop up here and there and everyone is excited. Even then, we should try to keep relevant research within the governmental institutions. And I think that will be crucial for this. Yeah, for this endeavor.
Yeah, I'll use that question to also go to more the private sector and to ask Bruno Küng, if kind of considering the opportunities and the challenges of quantum technologies, what do you think is the role of a private corporation or a private organization such as Zurich Instruments to ensuring that we kind of, I mean, of course, continue the development, so actually making sure that the bet that I think we're all in on, that it materializes, but also that we can that we can really materialize the opportunities that we're kind of the reason why we're all working on this.
Yeah, I mean, maybe addressing also what Philip just said now. So, okay, research happening behind doors and closed up, and it's gonna be in the end difficult to open that up in that sense if one cannot show to these corporations basically the interest in regulating technologies from yeah. So this is not so much my field of expertise, of course, but regulating bodies need to you know, convey this to the corporations that they actually will benefit in the end if their technology is regulated. Yeah.
Philippe Karoff, I see you're nodding. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, indeed. I mean, just going continuing on what Bruno was mentioning, and also what like both Brunos were saying about the ITU, for example, and the need for standards. The ability to set standards can also be an opportunity for the business. So it's not always just constraints, and it should not be perceived just as constraints, because when the norms are made, that's also when the technology can be deployed more broadly.
Yeah. And this is something, I mean, that I'm also seeing in my research and sort of also in between, say, research institutions and a private corporation, is also that there certainly is also with kind of history. And I mean, it's no, it's clear IBM also works in AI, but it's also learning from those technologies and kind of also seeing in a way, what can we do better, or what could be done differently with a newer technology such as quantum computing, and it doesn't necessarily need regulation. So I think, I mean, although I think the future will tell, you know, between self-regulation and international regulation, or maybe it's also something where we shouldn't think in either or. I often think it's a fallacy that we think in terms of either or. I think we probably need both. But certainly I think to also one of the questions that we had in the chat, it shouldn't be restrictive, as both of you were saying. So we, you know, there's no point if we're restricting early on because we're too afraid. I think sort of as society, we're not gaining anything of if we're being too afraid of any of these technologies. So I think it's maybe to one of the earlier points that was made in terms of also hype, it's a really rare opportunity also where we can, as a society, find the fine balance between being interested enough to continue the research, to continue working in this, without hyping it, but also without being too afraid, and really making sure that we can use these technologies. I'm afraid, I think we've lost one of our panelists, Jacques. I hope he has the possibility to come back. But since we're coming towards the end, and before I want to make a little announcement, I wanted to ask all of you for kind of a final statement. So if you're reflecting on the discussion that we were having, and I mentioned awareness earlier on, what do you think is sort of one or several aspects that you think society stakeholders should be aware of when they're thinking about quantum technology? So what should kind of be the takeaway from today's discussion? And I'll start in the order in which I see you on my screen. So that would be starting with Bruno Hattner.
So on my side, I think the message we need to convey, we discussed that already, so it's nothing new. It's really that for me, the risk of quantum technologies on mainly quantum computer is actually higher than the opportunities. So we really need to be aware of that when we look at what should be done. We cannot just say, let's wait until we have a quantum computer and see how we can use it. We know already, it was mentioned several times, we know already one of the bad uses, and we need to work on that. Unfortunately, it's already been done. I mean, the NIST is looking for new algorithms to replace what we have. We are looking at quantum technologies also to add security. So it's already going on, but I think we should really bring that to the stakeholders and to the decision makers that don't wait. I mean, really start right now and look at the danger of the quantum computer, even before, unfortunately, you look at the opportunities.
Okay. Next up, Bruno, what do you think should be one takeaway?
I mean, I support that, even if it's a little bit, from my perspective, on the pessimistic side. I still are on the side that we want to push for actually developing the technology, and since there's still a lot technical challenges to be tackled, I think the stakeholders, if I want to bring one point, is to try to get a down-to-earth understanding of the technology, of having a realistic picture what, for example, a quantum computer will look like, what are the engineering numbers behind it, get a realistic sense of what are the timelines to make wise decisions for research strategies. So that's something that I think is important. I want to bring as a conclusion.
Okay, thank you. Philip Kammerländer.
I fully agree with Bruno and Bruno. For the societal stakeholders, it's time to get involved and to get informed as much as everyone can. And I think maybe to also turn around the question a bit, what can we do? I think our job is to take as many people as possible with us on the ride. That is our job to do it. And I think we should definitely do that whenever we can.
Yeah, definitely. And Philippe Karov, you have the not at all pressure, but to give us the final on what you think should be the takeaway from a societal perspective.
I mean, let's be positive, and there are wonders and interesting, fantastic things to do in quantum at all levels. One doesn't just need a master or PhD in quantum transfer physics or quantum algorithm to get involved at some stage. For example, it could be instrumentation, enabling technologies, photonics. All of this can also be a door of entry, even for vocational training. And I think the people should get involved because it's not going anywhere. I mean, quantum technologies will happen, some of them faster than others, but it is indeed the right time to get involved, to learn, and also to make an informed opinion about how it should be regulated or not. But people can take it, even if that's this barrier to entry. It is important to get involved right now.
Excellent. I think that's an excellent final statement for this discussion. So I think what is important is that we're starting this discussion. So this is not at all, as you've noticed, we have maybe more questions and open points than we have answers. So I think it's important that we keep discussing this. And so although we're soon closing the session here, I hope that all of you have asked your questions in the chat, that you keep the questions, that you also please contact the panelists with the questions. Some of them are more technical and you can discuss them probably best in a one-on-one, but also that you keep thinking about these. And as Philippe was saying, that you keep aware and that you inform yourselves, and that also when making judgment about one or the other technology or about timelines, that you really make sure you're taking trusted sources into account. And so before closing, if I might ask our wonderful person in the background to put up one slide, because where we're also continuing this discussion and other discussions, and actually what is, I would say, and I'm of course very biased here, but is a wonderful opportunity for learning where the current status of a lot of these technologies is, where we are with a lot of these technologies, and what the most recent developments are, is in October. So we want to make you aware that you can now save the date for the 16th of October 2023, when we're having the next installment of the Quantum Industry Days, very kindly hosted by Philippe and his colleagues in Lausanne. So this time we'll be in the French-speaking part of Switzerland. And it will be a day where we're continuing discussions like this, but most importantly also focusing on discussions on where we really are with the technology. So we're discussing quantum computing, sensing, communications, and all the latest research, but also the impact on, or the role of international regulation and international organizations, that international organizations might be playing in quantum technology. So I invite you all to go on our website and already register. And with that, I would like to, first of all, thank ID Quantique for helping to setting this up, and also for being the magic helping hand in the background. And then thanks a lot to all our panelists for your excellent contributions and for starting the discussion. And I really hope that we continue this discussion and continue reflecting on this. So thanks a lot. Unfortunately, one can't hear applause, but I'm sure there would be a lot of applause if we were in a room.